Okay, I think we are ready. I hope you can hear me well. Welcome to our webinar about OData IntelliSense for Power Platform powered by our Kupp code analytics solution. Today, I would like to focus on different ways how we can improve the way we build OData queries against Power Platform and Dataverse, of course. So basically, I would like to show you the basics, how we can retrieve data, how we can extend the concept to retrieve data from related entities. And we're going to do that in our browser via PowerShell and a couple of other ways to do that. The most important part is to do it via JavaScript and client-side SDKs. So basically, we prefer to use TypeScript, of course. At the end, you can do the same thing with JavaScript. Cool. Yeah. As I said, we will focus on TypeScript and JavaScript. So basically, how we can build OData queries. The most important part is I would like to show you how you can use IntelliSense to build your queries. And of course, not just with the out-of-the-box entities, you can also include custom entities, relationships, and also custom actions and things like that. So at the end, we would like to build our queries within Visual Studio so we don't have to change the application, we don't lose our context. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. I need to fix my setup here again. So, okay, here we go. Yes. Quick introduction about us. We are Kupp software based in Austria, and of course, we are focused on Microsoft technologies, especially a Power Platform and Azure. So we got a couple of products to improve developer performance, but also code quality, documentation, analytics, and so on. So at the end of the day, we simplify a couple of tasks where you have to invest a lot of time to find root cause of some weird behavior and things like that. So this is what we do. And today I would like to show you KCA, which is basically the technology behind our Visual Studio extension. And yes, as I said, focused on OData queries. So let's move on to the agenda for today. As I said, quick introduction to Dataverse WebAPI. There are a couple of technologies here. Actually, it's nothing special. It's OData, and OData is a random protocol. It is built on top of HTTP, so a well-known thing, yeah. But when it comes to Dataverse, you have to consider there are a couple of limitations, yeah. So if you take a look at the official specification of the protocol, there are a couple of things you can't do with Dataverse. So I would like to explain a little bit about the limitations as well, but also on the things what we can do. In most cases, it's about retrieving data, like, okay, accounts and so on, and then you have a filter. But also there are a couple of advanced topics, and most people don't know that. So you can aggregate data, you can basically filter the related ones and so on. So there are a couple of things which are pretty handy if you know how to deal with that. But also you need to know the exact names of the attributes and so on. And this is why we said, okay, it makes sense to have IntelliSense there. So a couple of useful things. And point number 4 is our live demo. So of course, after the theory, I want to show you a few hands-on examples directly within Visual Studio. Okay, well, I would like to start with a very quick look at the official documentation here. I know there's a lot of text, but most of the stuff is not important for us right now. Today, I want to focus on the retrieve multiple call. You have to know behind the scenes, of course, it's just a normal HTTP request. So you can do the same thing with your browser, but in this case, you will get the promise back, so you can use useful things like a success callback and error callback and so on. And it also does some mapping for you, so you should go with this SDK method instead of using some native JavaScript object, because you lose a lot of handy features if you do it on your own way. So I always prefer to use retrieve multiple records or retrieve multiple just records. So it doesn't matter if you retrieve a single one or multiple ones. The most important thing is the options argument, because the entity logical name, it's pretty easy, straightforward, like account contacts or some other custom entity, whatever. In most cases, you will know it. But regarding the options, if you take a look at the right side, there are many different settings you can use, like select, stop, filter, and so on. And the most complicated one is actually filter and expand. So we will focus on those. And yeah, I think the rest is pretty clear. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is out of our scope for today because I think most people know how to write 𝗧𝗵𝗲 queries. So we basically scope our session today for those things like select, filter, expand, and so on. Okay, then before I go into the technical details, very quick hint here. As I said, most people don't know that you can also use PowerShell for that. So if you go to the browser and you basically execute a query, normal HTTP GET against the normal out-of-the-box 𝗧𝗵𝗲 instance, you can retrieve the data. But you can also generate a PowerShell request. So you go to your browser, go to network and say, okay, generate the code as PowerShell script, and you will get something like this. Of course, I've modified my identification token and so on. But at the end, you can use that to retrieve data and do some small task with that, do some reporting things and so on. It's a very quick and easy way to get the data and to apply some custom logic on that, so you don't have to write a console application and you don't have to do the whole setup thing, because everything is already there in your browser. So this is just a small recommendation, but I've been using this for many years now, and it works. It's a very cool thing when you have to deal with, some kind of small reports. Yeah. Okay, a few things about OData. I don't want to go too much into details here because, as I said, our focus is IntelliSense. But there are a few things you should know. Yeah? When you write a filter, something like this, you always got the $ filter equals something. And this is where most people stop, and they're using some kind of UI to basically build the query. And that's pretty slow. Yeah? And this is why we say, hey, we would like to stay in our Visual Studio. We want to keep our focus. And this is why we say, okay, let's remember those functions. We got contains, ends with, and starts with. Pretty simple, but very common, yeah. And as you can see, the syntax is also very straightforward. You got the entity name or attribute name, and then some kind of value, yeah. So I think that's very easy. A few other things, okay, you have comparison operations like, okay, lower than, greater than, and so on. So I think most of them are pretty easy, yeah. So you don't need a UI for that. You don't even need IntelliSense for that. Of course, it's cool, but you can remember those letters, so it's not a big deal at all. More challenging is actually the value here. So in this case, you got, I think it's 10,000. Yeah. In most cases, this is some kind of option set value. And well, remember those values is a tough one. That's a tough job. So this is why I said, okay, let's use IntelliSense for that as well. So keep that in your mind. We got a couple of functions here. We also have additional Microsoft defined functions, but those are the most common ones. So let's focus on those. And the last slide here regarding the theory is actually advanced topics. And this is what most people don't know. Yeah. Let's take a look at the first one. And by the way, this is a screenshot from the official Microsoft documentation. So it's no hidden secret at all. Yeah. You can use it straight ahead. So we got apply here, and that's an interesting one. You can group by status code. And that basically means you retrieve a lot of data grouped into small groups based on the status code. Yeah. This one, if you execute it like this, it's a pretty bad thing because you basically retrieve all the accounts and then group it. So you should apply some kind of aggregate functions or filter or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's also very straightforward. Yeah, you just have to take a closer look at those things, and then it's a easygoing task. Yeah. Let's take a look at this one as well. Primary contact names for accounts in Washington. Yeah. So this could be a little bit weird because you have to know that the group by will be applied first and then the filter. You would assume that it's the other way around, but this is a weird behavior, and you always have to consider that you can try it for free to execute the query. So on a vanilla system, you should be able to get some data. But as I said, keep that in mind. The group by clause will be applied first and then the filter. But yeah, before we go to the hands-on session, quick overview from the things we just saw. The first thing, very simple retrieve, and we're going to write those queries again. So within Visual Studio, I'm going to show you how we can write those queries without going to the system, without copy the entity names and the attribute names from the system, and of course, without using any additional application. So everything can be done within Visual Studio, and that's the main goal, as I said. the first thing, simply retrieve. And I assume most of you already know, okay, very common function with multiple records. First argument is the entity name without the S at the end. Always consider that. So there's no plural name here. And we got, okay, question mark, select first name. Very easy, straightforward thing. Yeah, we retrieve all contacts and we only select the first name. But yeah, we can extend that, of course, and say, okay, let's have a filter as well. First name none equals to, not equals to Robert. So you compare some things and you add a second condition here and 𝗧𝗵𝗲. And the first name, please consider there are single quotes here. This is important to know. And yeah, some kind of string value. So at the end, it's also a very simple one. And most people, when they try to write it, they also say, okay, I don't know the syntax, it's too complicated, and I need to know the specific attribute names and so on. I understand that. But if you think it's a second thought, you'll realize, okay, it isn't that complicated. So you also need the filter and the select statement, and that's it. Yeah, the rest is actually pretty clear. But yeah, let's take a look at a more complicated example, retrieve data from a related entity. And if you search for that, you will find a lot of blog posts about that and people asking why it's not working and so on. And in most cases, it works, but they don't know how to access the results because there are some things you have to consider when you handle the results. Yeah, so when it's not working and your JavaScript fails with some weird error, try it in the browser first. So go to your browser, execute the query, and see if you get the expected results. This is just a hint here. But yeah, here, same thing. And then we got the expand for us and we'll say, okay, parent customer ID. And that means I expand my query to retrieve data from a related entity. And of course, I also have to select the specific names so I can use it afterwards. But yeah, that's the same thing. And the third example is a very interesting one. We can use functions and Lambda expressions. So same thing here, but in this case, I got the filter, and the filter here is a relationship. And now I have the problem because it's not as one-to-one relationship. I have multiple appointments. So I got one account, I have multiple appointments. So at the end, I need some kind of function here to aggregate the data and to also filter it in some way. So what I can do now here is I use the any function, and that means I have one specific condition, and if it the condition is met in some way for just one record at least, everything is fine. Then I will get the data. So let's see, you have a variable here, I'll just call it O, and then I can access the attributes of the related appointments and apply some conditions there. So in this case, I say regarding object that is equal to null. And that means at the end, I want to retrieve all contacts where at least one appointment has no regarding object ID. Okay, and this is pretty cool actually, because most people, when they try to retrieve such a thing, yeah, they start to write some console application or using some other tools, yeah, but at the end, it's just one line. You just insert it in your browser, press enter, and that's it. You will get the data immediately. So you don't have this very big overhead when you write some console application or do whatever you have to do to retrieve the data. It's very straightforward, right? And yes, the fifth one is also very similar. In this case, I'm using the apply keyword. Yeah, it's a very rare one, so not many people are using that, but for grouping aggregating data, it's a very useful one. I think I already mentioned that before. The syntax is a little bit tricky. You need a couple of brackets here to do that, but with IntelliSense, it's way easier. So let's see how we can write those queries within Visual Studio. So let me introduce Kupp Code Analytics. Actually, it's a Visual Studio extension, as I said. So the technology behind this Kupp Code Analytics, the extension, the same name. And I want to show you how we can use it today. The setup is pretty simple. So we will do the full setup. It takes less than 2 minutes. It's for free, by the way, but regarding licensing topics, I'm going to explain that later. So let's take a look at a few examples. those are basically the same things what I'm going to show you now. But as you can see here, we got IntelliSense. And yes, it's a small thing, but a very helpful feature, yeah. Because in this case, okay, first parameter, okay, just the entity name, yeah. And it's pretty handy when I know the logical name, but also the display name, because sometimes it's different, especially if you're working on international projects with different languages, yeah. The base language should be English, of course, and then you got some weird, I don't know, name in Hebrew or whatever. So sometimes it's a tough job to identify the right ones, and this is why it's useful. But yeah, a second example here, I got 𝗧𝗵𝗲, and I think I already mentioned that you got a couple of predefined functions. Yeah, some of them are from the protocol, some of them have been defined by Microsoft, so there are different ones. But in this case, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, it's out of the box functionality from the protocol. So I can 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and then different functions and attributes. And of course, I got some kind of description here as well. So at the end, when I need to write a query, I know approximately what I would like to do, but I don't know the exact syntax. And just typing, as I do it with 𝗧𝗵𝗲 code, when I have to explore a new library, I just type something and I can see what I can use, and based on that, I can make my decisions. That works quite well. So this is why we do the same thing here with our OData queries. And of course, the whole thing works not just for the simple ones, but also for context-specific information. So in this case, if you take a closer look at this example here, we got select first name, filter, and so on. And then we got the relationship, so from contact to appointments. And then I got my any function and the variable. And with the variable name and then slash, I can open the new context. So when I put my cursor there, I'm in the context of an appointment. And you can see that, of course, I got IntelliSense for my appointment context. But if I would be at the right position, so if I replace null with something else, I would be the context of contact in this case. So I can compare data from the related appointments to the data from the contact itself. And that's at the end a very useful thing, because when I need to know the attribute name of an appointment entity or any other entity, it's a tricky one because there's so many similar names. And if you have to deal with custom attributes, it's getting worse. So this is why it's very, very useful when you have those kind of things in your functions there. Okay, cool. Then let's take a look at our examples here. I will basically show you more or less what we have seen already, but I would like to show you that hands-on so you can see how it works in a live session. So let me switch to my Visual Studio here. Quick introduction to my project. That's a very simple project. It's more or less our playground. So nothing special here. Let me set the focus here so we don't get confused. So I got a normal solution. I got my web resources here. And by the way, sorry if it's not readable, but for the code, of course, I will zoom in. Let me do that for you. Okay, it should be readable now. But before we go into the details of the code, let me show you how we can do the setup first. So when you go to extensions and you search for KCA, you should be able to find it. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, it's already installed, so I don't have to do anything here. Then it usually will ask you about your connection, but in this case, let me show you that. So you can go to configure or all connections. In this case, let me configure a new one. I load my organizations. Of course, there are a couple of different options how I can connect to my system, but the default one is basically so integrated security, of course, so I don't have to enter any credentials. And let's go with this one. Let's do a quick test here. Okay, I'm connected. And yeah, when I have a new connection, we will basically load all the metadata so we can provide IntelliSense within milliseconds. We do that for C# and also for JavaScript, and this is why we have to wait another minute. But yeah, it's usually pretty fast. I mean, it always depends on the size of the system, if you have many different entities and so on. But yeah, in this case, it's a small system, so it's a very simple one. Okay, so now I'm done with my configuration, and now I should be able to start. As I said, in this case, I got TypeScript, but I can do, of course, the same thing with JavaScript. So at the end, I just need to use the official SDK, and then it should work. So hopefully it works now. Okay, cool. Unfortunately, I cannot zoom in here for my IntelliSense window. I hope you can see it. But yeah, in this case, same thing. I got account, I got my display name here, and of course the description. So for most entities, it's pretty clear, so I don't need a description for contact. But sometimes I have to deal with custom entities and need some time to get used to the system and the data model, and then it's pretty helpful to have that here. So let me write the whole thing from scratch, so it's easier then. And this is basically the case when I have to write a query. In this case, I got my predefined ones, but what I usually do is, okay, I start with question mark, and then I can say, okay, select, and those things are pretty easy, but the real benefit is here. I got the attribute list, and of course, it depends on the entity name here. So if I changed it to appointment or opportunity, whatever, my context will change here as well. But yes, I got my first name, as I said, display name, and you can see it here. I get the attribute name, the attribute type. And this is a pretty useful one. As I already mentioned, there are a couple of limitations in the Dataverse WebAPI. So for example, multi-select option sets, you can't use it. Maybe there are some planned updates. As far as I know, there are no plans to support that soon. But yeah, there are some limitations. That's okay. For most cases, we don't need it anyway. So let's see what else we have. Do we have anything with type? Nope. I want to see some attributes with some limitations, but actually that's a good one. Private contact ID, you can see this one is read only. I cannot set it directly here, but also it's an entity reference to contact. And yes, I got the description as well, but the most important information is actually the type. This is very useful when I have to deal with the results, because I want to know, okay, is it an entity reference? Is it a column set, whatever? I can see it here immediately, and that's a very nice one. But also, I got a couple of predefined functions. For example, this one contains, okay, got the property name and the property value. And actually, there are two different contains functions. So you can see it here. There's a normal one contains, and there's a Microsoft one. So sometimes you have to be careful, okay, which one you're going to use. But yeah, with the description, I think it's pretty easy to understand what's going on. Let's say what else we have here. There are many of them. But yes, I think we don't have to go through all of those things here. I think you can understand the idea. And there are a couple of other Microsoft functions. Some of them deal with dates and so on. So yes, that's a very nice feature here. So let's go with first name. And of course, I can continue adding some stuff. As I said, that's pretty straightforward. Same one with filter. Let's do that as well. But I think you can understand the idea, so I don't have to go through all of those examples here. Age, and age is read only, that's okay. Aging 30, okay, is it money? Okay, that's weird. I didn't know that. Okay, that sounds weird, but if I have a base currency, it must be money. Okay. What else do we have here? So created on, created by, and created on. I got a date time here. Okay. Yeah, but of course I can use the same things here, greater than, lower than, and so on. So a couple of things what I can do here. So then let's move that, and let's go to another example, actually a more interesting one. Let's copy that first. Okay. And this is pretty useful. As I already said, the basic examples more or less okay, because in most cases you know the attribute names. But when it comes to related data, it's getting challenging. So let's see, account, primary contact. No, but that's a boring one. Let's take a look at some other things here. Contact, appointment, yes. Okay. And as you can see, that's a very interesting one. The context has changed. You can see it on the right side. I'm in the context of an appointment now. So my query starts with contacts. I can select some attributes from the contact and then switch to appointments. And now I have to select something from appointments. So for example, the subject. Okay, and that's interesting. Okay, then let's move on to another one. Apply. And, sorry, not apply. The filter, so it's the same thing more or less. I can use expand, and also I can use relationships in my filter as well. So I can basically retrieve data from related entities, or I can filter based on attributes from related entities. But to be able to do so, I need to apply a Lambda function here. So let's say, okay, the whole thing, I got an appointment here, and I can use all or any, there's just two of them. All basically means, okay, every related record must fulfill the condition, and any is just one of them. But yeah, I think that's pretty clear. So let's go with our, and now I'm in context of appointment again, as I said. Let's say subject. I got equals. And now in this case, okay, it's directly null. Or, and this is an interesting fact, I can compare my current variable, so the subject of any related appointment can be compared to an attribute of my account. So in this case, I'm back at the contact. Sorry, not the count, I mean contact, of course. So I'm back at the contact now, so I can do things like that. And yes, sometimes there are some limitations, especially with customers fields and so on. So there are a couple of things you can't do. But in most cases, the query works. So at the end, you can just copy the query, put it in your browser window, and see what's going on. And the last one is more or less the same thing here. I group by, as I said, that's a weird syntax. But yeah, it works too, of course. You can group by and you can basically aggregate the data. So in this case, let's see how it looks like when I copy that and I use my browser for that. So in this case, normal browser, nothing special. Let me put it there. I got the question mark twice. And yes, it works. So of course, you have to know in this system, this is a daemon wired without any test data. This is why I don't retrieve much values here, but you can see I got two contacts there with the same status code. And this is how it works behind the scenes. And if you want to copy that as a PowerShell, you can do that here. As I said, that's pretty useful. I'm not going to show you that right now, because when you do that, you will see the cookies and so on, a couple of session data, which is actually a confidential one. So I should not show you that on camera. So yeah, just feel free to explore it on your own. But of course, we can use the other queries as well, put it in your browser directly, and you will see the results there. But yes, as I said, the main focus is IntelliSense, and as you can see, it works pretty good. From time to time, there are some limitations, as I said. But when you go to a system and you change your data model, you add new stuff there, it will be in your Visual Studio directly, so you don't have to do anything. Sometimes when there are some issues with publishing and so on, you have to refresh the cache. So you go to Kupp Analytics connection and say refresh cache. And depending on your system, it will take up to 2 minutes, but in most cases it's less than that. And then you can continue working with your new data model. Yes, but that's all from my side regarding the hands-on part. So let me go back to my slides there. I think this is going to, okay, that's done. So now I should be able to continue. Yes, cool. Okay, then let me go back to my slides here. As I said, this was our live demo session, basics of OData queries. As I said, it's pretty straightforward. It's not a rocket science. You just have to enable it, and then it basically works. But it's very handy, so you don't have to switch applications and build your queries in some browser window. You can do it directly within Visual Studio. And well, yeah, one thing regarding licensing, there are a couple of features within our extension, but OData queries is part of the free license, so you can just use it. There will be a license prompt to enter your email address and so on, but it's for free. So even for a commercial project, you can use it. There are a couple of other features as well. Some of them already included in other tools, but yeah, it just comes in handy when you have one extension to do all of those kind of things. Yeah, okay, fetch XML, query converter, and so on. But feel free to explore it on your own, or let us know if you have any problems or any ideas about that. Yeah, our feedback is very welcome. And now I'm done with my main content here. So let me take a look at the Q&A part. Usually I don't take a look at the comments during the session, so let me check it out now. Okay, there are a couple of messages here. Just give me a second to take a look at that. And by the way, we still have enough time, so feel free to share your opinion or write your questions down. Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, there's a question about Power Portal. Yes, let me try to answer that without the focus on Power Portal itself. There are a couple of places where you can use OData. Of course, it's the preferred way to retrieve data and also create data and delete and so on. So you can do different things here. You can also use it in Power Automate flows and so on. So there are different ways. Our focus is Visual Studio. So this is why we say, okay, rescope the whole thing to Visual Studio. When you have to deal with other applications and you need the query, of course, you can start up Visual Studio, write your query, and then copy it and paste it somewhere else. But that's not the idea. That's not our focus. Yeah, we support developers when they have to write some TypeScript, JavaScript code within Visual Studio. That's our goal here, and this is why we don't have direct support for other environments like portals and flows and so on. So yeah, but at the end you will get the same query. So you can either use Visual Studio together with our extension, or you can use any other application where you can build OData queries for Dataverse. At the end you have the same result and can use it then. Okay. Yes, there's a question about IntelliSense and where we get the data from. As I said, we basically retrieve the metadata from the system directly. So for out-of-the-box attributes and entities, of course, there's the out-of-the-box description. So based on the language you're using for the connection to Dynamics. So if you're using a technical user with English UI settings, you will get the English description. But if you get a Spanish user, you will get the Spanish description. And yes, of course, it also works for custom entities. But in most cases, when you create new attributes or new entities, the people don't fill the description field. So at the end, you will see the type, because you have to, obviously, you have to choose select the type, but you won't see the description. Yeah, but it's up to you. When you say, okay, you want to add something, you go to the system, add the description, publish it, refresh the cage, and then you will get the updated description there. Well, yeah, there's a question how we can avoid syntax errors. Well, let me show you something. I forgot to mention that. Of course, there's an output window. Let me bring that back. I hope I can zoom in here. Nope, I can't. Yeah, sorry for that. The text is pretty slow. I don't know how to zoom in here. But you see, when I type something or when I edit the query, you will see that. So that's a hint. But please consider, you see the line number here, sorry, the column, and that basically means the position within the query. So if you type a new query, position 0 is there. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, what else? Let me see. Yeah, are there any limitations regarding large data sets? Well, yes, of course, you cannot retrieve, I think it's more than 5,000 records. Then you have to apply paging, yeah. But that's not a problem of OData or IntelliSense. There will be a link, so we'll get the results. And there will be a property called next page or just next with a URL. And within the URL, there's an argument. It's more or less a paging cookie. So take a look at the Microsoft documentation, then you will understand. But yes, there are some limitations, but you have to deal with the results anyway. So when you process the results, you have to retrieve the next page, and then you do a second call. And with the second call, you get the next page then. Okay. Yes, and there's a question regarding our extension and Visual Studio versions. Yeah, well, officially we support 2019 and 2022. Unfortunately, there's no support for Visual Studio Code because we do a lot of code analytics with Roslyn and so on. There are a lot of compatibility issues, and this is why we don't have any plans in the roadmap. I mean, technically, it should be possible to do actually to publish a new version for Visual Studio Code, but so far there are no plans to do so. Okay, I don't see any other questions here. We're almost over the time, I think. Okay, we still have some time left. But yeah, if there are no other questions, I think we are done with the session. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening to me. And yeah, feel free to explore the extension. As I said, it's for free, so you can go to the marketplace or download it directly within Visual Studio. Yeah, then that's it from my side. I think there's one message. Okay, it's just okay, got it. Then okay, again, thank you guys for listening. Yeah, see you soon then. Bye bye.